I want to start today by calibrating our watches. Let's take a trip back in time. 20 years, almost exactly.
30 years. Yeah.
I want you to close your eyes. Unless you're driving, please don't close your eyes if you're driving. And just picture the world as it was on the morning of February 8th, 2006.
2006. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's really set the scene here, because 20 years, it feels like a geological epoch in tech time.
It really does.
I mean, you have to understand, this is a pre-iPhone world. We're still a year away from Steve Jobs pulling that device out of his pocket on stage.
Right. So if you wanted to check your email, you were sitting down at a desktop computer, probably a big beige box.
Almost certainly a beige box.
Yeah.
And Facebook. It was still mostly just for college students. It hadn't opened up to the general public yet. Right. Twitter didn't even exist.
If you wanted to watch a video online, you definitely weren't on YouTube. I mean, it was barely a year old, and it was mostly, that one video of the guy at the zoo.
Yeah, me at the zoo. You were probably downloading some super grainy clip off of LimeWire or Kazaa.
And just praying it didn't brick your entire computer with a virus.
Exactly. It was a completely different digital landscape. And on that specific morning, February 8th, in a pretty nondescript office building in Seattle, a small group of people were huddled around a monitor.
And these weren't kids in a garage?
No, not at all. These were former Microsoft executives, seasoned pros who'd seen big launches before. But the energy in that room, by all accounts, was different. They were nervous.
They were hovering over the enter key, waiting to go live.
That's it. They had been working in stealth mode for over a year on this new website. They'd run all the projections. They'd done the math on server capacity. They thought they knew what to expect.
But they were ready.
So around 8:00 a.m. Pacific time, they flip the switch. They launch Zillow.com.
And then
Chaos. Absolute digital meltdown.
the servers crashed.
Oh, they didn't just crash. They effectively incinerated. I mean, the site was completely unusable within hours. They had anticipated a certain level of curiosity, for sure.
Sure, you expect some traffic.
They figured, okay, the early adopters, the tech blogs, maybe they'll check it out. But the traffic they got on that very first morning was exponential. It just blew every single projection out of the water.
See, this is what fascinates me about this moment. Usually when a site crashes, it's because people are trying to buy something, concert tickets, the new PlayStation.
Before the bots get them all right.
Exactly. But here, nobody was buying anything. You couldn't buy a house on the site. You couldn't even really talk to an agent.
That's the key. They weren't shopping. They were snooping.
This was the birth of what we now call real estate porn.
It really, really was. You have to put yourself back in that pre-2006 mindset. Before that morning, real estate was a black box. It was a secret society.
Totally opaque.
If you wanted to know what your neighbor's house was worth, or what your boss paid for his mansion, or the value of your ex-girlfriend's parents' place, you just couldn't know. It was impossible.
You had to be a real creep about it. You'd have to go down to the county clerk's office and, dig through physical microfiche or these dusty paper logs?
Getting dust all over your hands, yeah. Or you had to call a real estate agent. And the moment you asked an agent, hey, what is that house worth? You weren't just a curious person anymore.
You were a lead.
You were a lead. You were in the sales funnel. There was no such thing as casual browsing. The agent held all the keys to the data kingdom. They were the gatekeepers.
But Zillow, in an instant, just changed the rules of engagement. They put a price tag on every single rooftop in America, whether it was for sale or not.
And that server crash was the signal. It was the market screaming at the top of its lungs, we have been starved for this information. It was definitive proof that there's this massive, unfulfilled hunger for transparency in what had historically been the most opaque major industry in the economy.
So here we are. It's February 6th, 2026. We are almost exactly 20 years on from that server crash. And the company that started that revolution, it has had a wild 2 decades.
To put it mildly, I mean, it has been a true roller coaster.
We're calling this deep dive the Glass House, because Zillow promised to build this beautiful glass house where we could all see inside the market. But as we're going to find out, living in a glass house is incredibly dangerous.
Especially when you start throwing stones yourself.
Yeah, and they have thrown plenty. We're going to track how they went from that simple look up your neighbor's value website to this massive, all-encompassing housing super app. We're going to look at the billion-dollar failure of their house-flipping business, these scandalous culture accusations that rocked them in the mid-2010s, and the absolute legal war zone they find themselves in right now in 2025.
It's a story of, I think, hubris of technology and ultimately the realization that you can have all the data in the world, but you can't algorithm away the messiness of the real world.
So let's start at the beginning. Segment 1, the origin story. Because this wasn't some scrappy startup in a garage, right? This was a different kind of launch.
No, and that's a really common misconception.
Yeah.
Zillow wasn't two college dropouts eating ramen and coding in a basement. It was founded by Rich Barton and Lloyd Frink.
And these were heavy hitters.
Oh, yeah. These were top executives at Microsoft during its golden era, the 90s. They were, part of the machine that built the modern digital world.
But more importantly, before Zillow, they built something else that basically changed how we all live our lives.
Expedia.
Okay, so connect the dots for me. How do you go from booking flights to pricing houses? Is there a through line there?
It's the exact same philosophy. It's the same core idea about information asymmetry.
Okay.
Think about what it was like to book a trip in, say, 1995. If you wanted to fly to London, what did you do? You called a travel agent.
Right. You picked up the phone.
And they had a computer terminal, usually the old Sabre system.
Yeah.
And that screen faced them. You couldn't see it. They would type for a minute, frown a little bit, type some more, and then say, okay, I can get you to London for $800.
And you just had to say yes. You had no idea if there was a flight for $400 on a different airline. You didn't know if flying on a Tuesday instead of a Friday was half the price. You were completely helpless.
You were helpless. The agent was the gatekeeper. They held the book of secrets. Rich Barton looked at that dynamic and said, this is fundamentally inefficient. The power should belong to the consumer, not the intermediary.
So Expedia was just turning the screen around.
That's the perfect analogy for it. It was democratizing the data. It was giving you the same information the agent had so you could make your own decision.
So after they spin Expedia out of Microsoft and eventually sell it for a huge profit, Barton is looking for his next project, his next gatekeeper to slay.
Right. It's 2005. He's wealthy, he's successful, and he's trying to buy a new house for his family in Seattle. And he runs headfirst into that same Book of Secrets wall.
The real estate version.
The real estate version. He later told this story about how he just couldn't find basic information. He couldn't find past sale prices for a home he was interested in. He couldn't even find the correct addresses half the time online.
It was all locked up.
It was all locked up in the MLS, the multiple listing service, which only agents could access. He asked his agent for the raw data, and the agent basically patted him on the head and said, don't you worry about the numbers, just trust me, I'll find you a great place.
Which is pretty much the worst possible thing you can say to a data-obsessed tech guy who just disrupted the entire travel industry.
It's like waving a red flag at a bull. He got frustrated. He started asking that fundamental question, what is this house actually worth? And he realized that unless the consumer could answer that question for themselves, independently, they were always going to be at a disadvantage in the biggest financial transaction of their lives.
So that's the spark. They incorporate in December 2004. They set up shop in downtown Seattle with about 20 people. Barton and Frink self-fund it initially because, well, they can.
They had the capital from Expedia. And they spend a full year, more than a year, just scraping data, just building the foundation.
They had to digitize a paper world.
Completely. They were pulling tax assessments from thousands of different county websites, many of which were barely functional. They were licensing public records, satellite imagery. They were building a database of the entire country's housing stock before they even had a product to show for it.
And then came the launch we talked about. But the killer app, the thing that really made the servers melt, was the Zestimate.
The Zestimate. Even the branding was genius, wasn't it? It sounds so scientific and official.
It sounds authoritative. The Zestimate. It sounds like something NASA came up with to value moon rocks.
Yeah, it was such a radical concept. I really can't overstate this. Before Zillow, if you wanted a home valuation, you had two options. You could pay an appraiser $400 or $500.
Or you could call a realtor who would run comps for you. But again, then you're a lead.
You're a lead. There's an obligation attached. Zillow came along and said, nah, we'll just run a complex math equation and we will slap a price tag on every single home in America. For free.
And again, the absolute genius of it was pricing the homes that weren't for sale.
That was the viral loop. That was the secret sauce.
Yeah.
If they had only listed homes that were for sale, they would have just been a digital version of the newspaper classified section, which is, boring.
Utilitarian, but
Right.
boring.
But by putting a value on your home and your parents' home and your high school rival's home, they made everyone an active participant in the real estate market, whether they intended to be or not. It tapped into vanity.
Yeah.
It tapped into jealousy. It tapped into pure, unadulterated curiosity.
And man, did it work. By July 2006, just a few months after that chaotic launch, they secured $25 million in venture capital. They were just growing like a weed.
And get this, they were profitable by 2010.
That's astounding. In the modern tech era, that's practically unheard of. I mean, you're expected to burn cash for a decade before you even think about making a dime.
It just shows how incredibly efficient and powerful their advertising model was. Real estate agents were desperate to be on the platform because that's where all the eyeballs were. They had no choice.
So they go public in July 2011, trading under the ticker symbol Z, just Z.
Talk about a flex on one letter. That's some old school 18-key level confidence.
But the engine of all this success, the thing that kept people coming back day after day, year after year, was the Zestimate. And that brings us to the second part of our story, because this algorithm, it's a very powerful but very dangerous double-edged sword.
Very sharp one.
Let's dive into that engine of engagement. How does the sausage actually get made? Because for a lot of people, the Zestimate feels like magic or, black magic, depending on whether the number is lower than you want it to be.
Right. It's either gospel or it's garbage, depending on what it says about your house. It's an automated valuation model, or AVM for short.
AVM, okay.
Essentially, it's a giant regression analysis. It takes all the hard public facts it can find: square footage, lot size, the number of bedrooms and bathrooms, the most recent tax assessment, and it mashes that up with user-submitted data.
So if I go on and claim my home and I say I put in a new roof or finish the basement, the algorithm digests that.
It digests that, yes. And then it layers on the most important ingredient: comparable sales, or comps.
What the neighbors sold for.
Exactly. If the house next door, which is very similar to yours, just sold for $500,000, then yours is probably worth something close to that. It's constantly adjusting based on real-time market activity. But here is the rub, and it's a big one.
The fine print.
The fine print. Zillow has always, from day one, legally covered themselves. They say very clearly, if you bother to look, this is a starting point for a conversation. This is not an appraisal.
But human psychology doesn't read fine print. We see a number, a specific number down to the dollar, and we treat it like gospel. We anchor to it.
We anchor to it immediately, and that creates what I call the Goldilocks problem.
Break that down for me, the Goldilocks problem.
Okay. Imagine you're selling your house. You've lived there for 10 years. You love it. You put in new floors. You painted. You think it's worth $600,000. But you pull up Zillow, and the Zestimate says $550,000.
Oh, I'm furious. I'm absolutely livid. I think Zillow is actively sabotaging my sale because every potential buyer is going to look at that Zestimate and think I'm overpriced.
Exactly. You hate Zillow. It's a terrible, inaccurate tool. But now flip it. Imagine you're the buyer for that same house. It's listed for $600,000, but the Zestimate says it's only worth $550,000.
I love Zillow. It's my negotiating partner. It's giving me leverage to make a lowball offer.
Right. So in every single transaction, Zillow is almost guaranteed to be the villain to at least one party. The Zestimate is either too hot or too cold. It's almost never just right for everyone involved.
And sometimes the machine just breaks. It goes haywire. We have to talk about June 14th, 2011, the day of the algorithm shift.
Oh, June 14th, 2011, a date that will live in infamy for longtime Zillow users. It was a crisis of faith.
What happened? What did they do?
They tweaked the algorithm. They updated the formula. They added new data sources. They changed the weighting of certain factors, all in an effort to be more accurate. A noble goal.
Sounds reasonable.
But the result was that millions of home values changed, sometimes dramatically overnight.
And it wasn't just the value for today. They retroactively changed the historical data graph.
That was the part that felt like gaslighting. That was the crazy-making part. You might have checked your home's value history on June 13th, and the little graph said your house was worth, say, $300,000 back in 2008.
Okay.
You log in on June 15th after the shift, and suddenly that same graph says your house was only worth $280,000 in 2008.
They rewrote history.
They rewrote history. People were howling. It felt like their personal wealth, their financial history was being deleted or altered by some computer glitch in Seattle. It really, really highlighted how fragile and arbitrary this truth was. We attach so much of our net worth and our identity to this number, but the number is just a best guess by a machine that has never actually been inside your house.
So that's the big question. How accurate is it, really? Because like we said, sometimes it feels spot on and other times it seems like it's in a different galaxy.
The Wall Street Journal did a great analysis way back in 2007, not long after the launch, and their conclusion still largely holds up today. They said that when the Zestimate is good, it's frequently within a few percentage points of the actual sale price.
Which is pretty impressive for a machine.
Very impressive on a macro scale.
Yeah.
But the report continued, when it's bad, it is terrible.
Terrible! I love that very technical journalistic term.
It's the perfect word for it. And it's because of the blind spot issue. The algorithm loves data. It can count. It loves square footage. It loves the number of bathrooms. It's great with quantifiable data.
But it has no nose.
It has no nose. You can't smell the cat pee that is soaked into the subfloor. It has no ears. It can't hear the constant highway noise. It's much louder in the backyard than from the street.
You can't see that the kitchen renovation the owner claimed was done with cheap particle board cabinets from a big box store instead of high-end custom marble.
Precisely. It can't judge quality, condition, or nuance. In 2016, Zillow themselves claimed their median error rate was about $14,000. Now, across the entire U.S. economy, that's an incredibly impressive level of accuracy.
But for an individual family.
For an individual family trying to sell their home, being off by $14,000 it's a new car. It's a year of college tuition. It's real, tangible money.
There was actually a legal challenge about this pretty early on, wasn't there?
Yes, the National Community Reinvestment Coalition filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, back in 2006, right after the launch. They called the tool misleading and argued it could be particularly damaging to low-income and minority neighborhoods where the public data was often sparse or inaccurate.
What happened with that?
The FTC declined to investigate. But the criticism has always lingered. Zillow presents these numbers with an air of scientific certainty when they are really just sophisticated and sometimes very flawed guesses.
But despite the flawed guesses, they absolutely won the traffic war. They became the destination. And once they had the audience locked down, they started the next phase of the plan. Segment 3. Consolidation and monopoly building.
This is the if you can't beat them, buy them phase of the company's life. Or maybe more accurately, if you are already beating them, buy them anyway, just so they can never, ever come back.
The Pac-Man strategy. Just gobble up everything in sight.
It started relatively small. They bought a company called Postlets in 2011, which was their first real acquisition. But then they realized they had a massive hole in their armor, a geographic blind spot.
New York City.
New York City. It's always different, isn't it?
Always.
It's a rental-heavy, broker-dominated, incredibly complex jungle, and Zillow's national model just couldn't crack it. The data was different. The rules were different. So in 2013, they did the smart thing. They bought StreetEasy for $50 million.
And StreetEasy was the undisputed king of New York real estate websites.
It was the Bible. If you were looking for an apartment in New York, you were on StreetEasy. By buying them, Zillow instantly locked down the single most important and valuable real estate market in the world.
But the big one, the one that caused a seismic shift in the industry, was Trulia.
2015. This was the monster deal. Trulia was their main rival, their only real rival at scale. It was Coke versus Pepsi. It was Ford versus Chevy, and Zillow just bought Pepsi. They paid $2.5 billion in an all-stock deal.
That is a staggering amount of money.
It was huge. And at the time that deal closed, the combined Zillow and Trulia entity controlled about 70% of all online real estate search traffic in the United States.
70%. That is, for all intents and purposes, a monopoly on consumer attention.
It meant that if you were a real estate agent, you had to pay Zillow. You couldn't afford to ignore 70% of the potential buyers in your market. It gave them immense pricing power over the very agents they claimed to serve.
And they didn't stop with search portals?
No, the shopping spree continued. They bought Dotloop, a company that handles digital signatures and paperwork, to get into the transaction itself. They bought ShowingTime, which is the software that most agents use to schedule home tours.
So now they control how you find the house and how you book an appointment to see it.
And then they bought companies like VRX Media for the photography and virtual tours. They were building a walled garden, an end-to-end ecosystem. They want the search, the tour, the documents, the mortgage, everything to happen inside the Zillow universe.
By 2023, they had a database of over 160 million properties. They had effectively built a digital twin of the entire U.S. housing market. They looked completely unstoppable.
They were on top of the world.
Which brings us to the most dramatic, the most telling part of this entire 20-year story. The moment where they got too arrogant. Segment 4. The Great Stumble, the Rise and Fall of Zillow Offers.
This is a business school case study that will be taught for decades. It is the perfect example of big tech hubris crashing into the hard reality of the physical world.
So, set the stage for us. It's 2018. Zillow is printing money from its advertising business. They're dominant. Why on earth would you change a winning formula?
Because Wall Street is never satisfied. Wall Street loves growth, and there is a natural ceiling to how many ads you can sell to real estate agents. The real money in real estate, the truly massive prize, isn't in the advertising. It's in the transaction itself.
The commission, the asset.
The asset. The total value of homes sold in the U.S. is in the trillions. The ad market is in the billions. They wanted to move from selling ads to owning the house.
So they decided to become the buyer.
They pivoted to what the industry calls iBuying, instant buying. And the pitch to the consumer was incredibly seductive. Selling your house is a nightmare. You have to clean it, stage it, leave for open houses on the weekend, negotiate with picky buyers over repairs. What if Zillow just wrote you a check?
We'll buy it from you directly, you walk away with cash in hand, and we'll handle the hassle of fixing it up and reselling it.
And Rich Barton, the founder who had stepped back from the CEO role, actually returned as CEO in February 2019, specifically to lead this charge. He called it Zillow 2.0. He called it their moonshot.
And the underlying logic, the core belief was, we have the data, we have the Zestimate, we know the price of every home in America better than anyone else. Therefore, we can flip houses with virtually zero risk.
That was the theory. They believed their algorithm gave them a crystal ball. They thought they could predict home price appreciation with surgical accuracy. They expanded aggressively into hot markets like Phoenix, Los Angeles, Austin, Miami. They were buying thousands and thousands of homes every single month. They wanted to be the market maker for American housing.
But then came 2021, and the crystal ball just shattered into a million pieces.
It was a spectacular, public, humiliating disaster. In November 2021, the news broke. Zillow was shutting down the entire Zillow Offers division, effective immediately.
Why? What went so catastrophically wrong?
The algorithm failed. It turns out that predicting the housing market 3 to 6 months into the future is incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible. Their model was broken. They were consistently overpaying for houses just to win the deal against competitors like Opendoor.
And then underestimating the cost of repairs.
And underestimating the repairs. They couldn't know from a desk in Seattle that a house in Phoenix needed a new $15,000 air conditioning unit or that the foundation had a crack.
And the market itself shifted on them.
Right. The crazy red-hot market of early 2021 started to cool just slightly. They had bought high at the peak, and by the time they fixed the houses up and put them back on the market, buyer demand had softened. They were left holding the bag.
What were the numbers? How bad was the damage?
In the third quarter of 2021 alone, the Zillow Offers division lost $420 million.
$420 million in just 3 months.
It's an almost incomprehensible number. That's roughly $4.6 million a day that they were losing. They had about 7,000 houses on their books that were underwater. They were literally selling beautiful homes for less than they had paid for them, just to stop the bleeding and get the cash back.
And Barton had to get on the earnings call and announce that he was laying off 25% of the company's entire workforce. It was a bloodbath.
It was a complete and utter humiliation. It shattered the myth of the data god. It was this humbling moment for big tech that proved that real estate is still fundamentally an analog, messy, human business. You need local knowledge. You need to know if the foundation is cracked. A computer in Seattle can't know that.
So Zillow Offers dies in a blaze of glory. But Zillow, the company, survives. They lick their wounds and they pivot again. Segment 5, the housing super app.
If you can't be the house flipper, then you want to be the operating system for everyone else involved in the transaction. This is the new strategy announced in 2022.
They call it the super app. It's a very trendy term in tech.
It sounds fancy, but it basically means they want to find a way to take a small tax from every single part of the real estate process. They identify what they call their 5 pillars of growth,
Which are
touring, financing, seller solutions, their partner network, and integrated services.
In English, that means they want to be your mortgage broker. They want to be your closing agent. They want to sell you title insurance.
Exactly. They are trying to deepen the revenue they get from each customer. Instead of just getting, say, $20 for sending an agent a lead, they want to get $2,000 or $3,000 for originating the mortgage for that same customer.
And how is that big pivot working out for them?
Well, if we look at the most recent numbers from 2024, it's a grind. There's no other way to put it. They brought in $2.24 billion in revenue, so it's still a massive company. But they posted a net loss for the year of $112 million.
So 20 years in, after all this market dominance, after becoming a household name, they are still losing money.
They are investing very heavily to try and build out this super app ecosystem. But it shows you that without the high revenue but terribly low margin house flipping business, they are still struggling to find the perfect, consistent profit machine.
Now, while all this business drama was happening on the balance sheets, there was some pretty serious drama happening inside the building, too. Segment 6, culture, controversy, and frat houses. Because the glass house had some serious cracks on the inside.
Yeah, every big tech company has its culture issues. But Zillow faced some particularly specific and ugly allegations around the 2014 to 2016 timeframe.
And this seemed to center on their high-pressure sales office in Irvine, California.
Right. Sales floors in any industry can be notoriously high pressure. You know, that Wolf of Wall Street kind of vibe.
Yeah.
There were a couple of lawsuits alleging pretty standard labor disputes, unpaid overtime, missed meal breaks, but then came the sexual harassment suit.
This was the one that really made headlines.
Yes. A former employee, who was represented by the very high-profile lawyer, Mark Garagos, filed a suit alleging that she was subjected to sexual torture.
Sexual torture. I mean, that is a horrific phrase to see in any legal filing, let alone one against a major public company.
The complaint was incredibly graphic. It described the Irvine office as an adult frat house. It alleged that managers not only condoned but actively participated in rampant sexual harassment. It painted this picture of a toxic, misogynistic, male-dominated environment that was completely at odds with the friendly, helpful, family-oriented brand that Zillow projects to the public.
And Zillow's response?
They fought it, of course. They put out statements saying these allegations did not reflect their company culture or the experience of the vast majority of their 1,200 employees. But, and this is almost always the tell, they eventually settled the suit in 2016 for an undisclosed amount. They paid to make it go away.
It's a really dark chapter in their history, but there was another culture clash around that time that was less dark and maybe more petty, but just as revealing. Do you remember the saga of McMansion Hell?
A slight chuckle in the voice.
No.
Oh, Kate Wagner. Yes, this was in 2017.
Can you explain what McMansion Hell is for anyone who hasn't had the pleasure?
It's a blog. It's a brilliant blog. Kate Wagner, the author, takes photos of these hideous, oversized, poorly designed luxury homes, which she usually finds on Zillow. And she writes these incredibly funny, biting architectural critiques of them. She points out the mismatched windows, the useless columns, the soaring lawyer foyer. It's architectural satire at its finest.
It is hilarious, but the legal team at Zillow did not find it funny.
Not one bit. They sent her a cease and desist letter. They threatened to sue her into oblivion for copyright infringement for using their photos.
Which is just insane because she's basically giving them free publicity, even if it is mocking. People are going to Zillow because of her blog.
It was a massive, self-inflicted PR disaster. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, the EFF, stepped in immediately to represent her pro bono. They argued it was a textbook case of fair use. You are allowed to use copyrighted images for the purpose of parody, commentary, and criticism.
Zillow looked like a massive corporate bully trying to crush a small-time blogger.
They did, and they backed down very quickly once the EFF got involved.
Yeah.
They dropped the threat. But the incident revealed how incredibly possessive and sensitive they were about their platform. They viewed the listing data and photos as theirs. They didn't want anyone messing with their product, even for a joke.
And that possessiveness, that desire to control the narrative, brings us right up to the present day. Segment 7, the modern legal wars. Because if you think the lawsuits of 2016 were bad, 2025 has been an absolute nightmare for their legal team.
It's been a siege, a multi-front war.
Let's start with the climate risk story because this is just fascinating. It pits the transparency for the buyer directly against the interests of the seller.
Okay, so in September of 2024, Zillow makes this big, splashy announcement. They're partnering with a data company called First Street Foundation to add climate risk scores to every single listing on their site.
And this is really useful stuff for a buyer. It's flood risk, wildfire risk, extreme heat risk over the next 30 years.
It's crucial information. If I'm buying a house in Florida or California or Arizona, I absolutely need to know if it's projected to be underwater or on fire or uninhabitably hot in 10 years.
This is the original Zillow mission, right? Transparency, power to the people.
It's the mission statement in its purest form. But then, by November of 2025, just over a year later, the data was gone. Zillow quietly scrapped the entire feature.
Why would they remove such valuable information?
Because the sellers and the real estate agents revolted. Homeowners saw their Zestimates drop overnight because their house now had a big red high flood risk badge slapped on it. Real estate agents complained that they couldn't move inventory in high-risk areas. The industry pushed back hard.
So Zillow had a choice. Do we tell the unvarnished, scary truth to the buyer, Or do we protect the sale and, by extension, the agent's commission?
And they chose the agent. They chose the industry. They removed the data.
That's really damning.
It's incredibly damning. It strongly suggests that when push comes to shove, Zillow's loyalty lies with the industry that pays its bills, not with the consumer who uses the app for free.
And it seems like the government has started to notice this kind of behavior too, which brings us to the antitrust suits.
Let's start with June 2025. The brokerage giant Compass sues Zillow. Now, Compass has this strategy of using private exclusives, listings that are kept off the open market for a few days, to generate buzz among their own agents. Zillow implemented a policy that effectively punished agents who used these private exclusives, basically saying you couldn't list on Zillow.
So if you don't give the listing to us instantly and first, you can't use our platform at all.
Exactly. Compass called it what it sounds like: illegal monopoly behavior, using their market dominance to stifle competition and control how agents do business. Gatekeeping.
And then came the commission lawsuit in Seattle in September 2025.
This one attacks the very core of their revenue model. It's a class action lawsuit that alleges Zillow actively misleads buyers. When you're on a listing and you click that big Contact Agent button, you naturally assume you're emailing the agent who is actually selling that specific house.
Right, the listing agent, the expert on that property.
But you aren't. In most cases, you are being sent to a premier agent, a completely random agent who has paid Zillow a premium for leads in that zip code. And Zillow takes a huge cut of their future commission, sometimes up to 40%.
Wow.
The lawsuit says this is deceptive steering. You, the consumer, are being sold to the highest bidder without your knowledge or consent.
But the biggest bombshell, the one that really sounds like a movie plot, is the Redfin deal.
The Redfin cartel allegation. This is serious stuff. In 2025, the attorneys general from 5 different states, Virginia, Connecticut, Arizona, New York, and Washington, all joined together to sue Zillow.
And what is the central charge?
They allege that Zillow paid Redfin, their main remaining national competitor in the search space, a sum of $100 million.
$100 million? For what? To buy them?
No, to stop competing. Specifically, the lawsuit alleges the money was to get Redfin to shut down its rental advertising business and transition all of those customers and that traffic over to Zillow.
That sounds like pure market allocation. That sounds like something from the robber baron era.
That's what the AGs are arguing. It's what lawyers call a pay-for-delay scheme or a non-compete payoff. If it's proven true, it's a flagrant textbook violation of federal antitrust law. It paints a picture of a company that is no longer trying to innovate to win, but is simply paying off its rivals to protect its monopoly.
It's the classic life cycle of a disruptor, isn't it? You start as the rebel crashing servers in 2006 to free the data for the people. You end up as the empire in 2026, allegedly paying off other rebels to keep the data locked down and profitable.
From the perspective of the Attorney General's office, it certainly looks that way.
So let's bring it all home. We have covered 20 years of this company's life, from the server crash to the iBuying crash, from the power to the people mission to the hide the climate data reality.
It has been a remarkable and transformative journey, and you can't take this away from them. Zillow changed the world. There's no doubt about that. We are, on balance, better off as consumers having access to this data than not having it.
I can't imagine trying to buy a house today without using it. It would feel like flying blind.
Neither can I. But we also have to recognize what Zillow is now. It is a media giant. It is an advertising platform. It is a publicly traded business that has an obligation to feed the beast and grow revenue every single quarter.
So here is the thought I want to leave all of you with today.
Let's hear it.
Zillow started with a simple and I think a noble mission to answer the question, what is that house worth? They wanted to give you, the consumer, the truth. But today, after removing climate risk data to appease the industry and allegedly paying rivals to stop competing for your business, have they become the very same gatekeepers they originally set out to destroy?
It's the ultimate and perhaps tragic question for them.
When you pull up that Zestimate on your phone tonight, and I know you will, we all will, are you really seeing the objective, data-driven truth? Or are you just seeing exactly what the multi-trillion-dollar real estate industry wants you to see?
Just remember, looking through the glass in a glass house goes both ways.
Precisely. Take that number with a grain of salt, maybe a whole shaker. Thanks for listening to this deep tag. We'll catch you on the next one.